Well, blessings, everybody. This is Apostle Crystal Lee. I am back. Wanted to finish out the evening with you tonight in our Torah portion, Uncontaminated Imaginations. This is Bereshit, the beginnings, in the beginning, part two. And it doesn't matter to me whether you're up or you're asleep. I got to do what I got to do. I promise you, I was so tired a little while ago, and I just was just so uh, uh, battling with myself. Like, you got to finish what you started, man. You cannot just go to sleep tonight. You got to finish what you started. And so I'm here tonight to finish what I started. And I pray that it blesses you as much as it has blessed me. To those that are coming in the room, come on in. Come on in. Let's have a little bit of a conversation. I promise you it won't be a 4-hour conversation tonight because I have just a little bit more to discuss with you, and I wanted to definitely um, keep my word to you tonight to come back and to finish what we started earlier. I had so many different things on my heart and my mind as we were leaving the space earlier this morning, and one of the things was just the discussion about breath, the breath of Yah. And a lot of people like to emphasize the you know, um, the birth of the Mashiach over all other births. While we all have very special births and everybody has an appointment, I was just sitting here thinking about how when the Father formed Adam, there's something about what he did or what he does in becoming a father. And it took me back to when I was first introduced to him as Father. Um, Something that he does uh, with the first Adam, he forms him and fashions him with his own hands. He doesn't have any intervention of a human. He doesn't have any human experience at all. He becomes human because the Father created him a body to be in the earth, a human, but he doesn't have any DNA from mankind to be in the earth. The Father literally fashioned and formed him with his own hands, and he breathed the very essence of who he was as God into the man's body. And man became a living soul, mind, will, and emotions enlivened. Because the truth of the matter is, without the soul, without the breath of Yah, we are simply just a ball of particles, right? Just a ball of particles. And we know this because out of the dust you came, into the dust you shall return, just particles, and non-enlivened, non-animate particles. But the Father decided after the creation, the recreation, and the forming of this particular man in this particular age, with his hands, he fashioned and formed him and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Now, when we look at the Mashiach, I'm saying every man, every person with a body, a person that has purpose is given a body in order to operate in the earth. And each of us have a appointment or purpose that we're here. Now, the Mashiach's purpose, he had a mother. He had a human mother, but his father was still Yah, right? And both of these are indicative of the transformation that happens in the DNA, the transformation that happens because of the Father, the seed, the transformation that happens in us when we are transitioning from one kind to the other kind, because remembering that we are created in the likeness and after the image of our Father. When we accept the finished work of the Mashiach, when we accept that the Father did something in sending that Son to be a final sacrifice for us, and when we receive that life that the Mashiach lived, we understand that there's a relationship that is necessary with the Father in order for that life to be lived. Then we begin to utilize our breath properly. I was thinking about this breath, and I began to cry out to the Father and have a discussion with him about, how we're utilizing the breath, how I utilize the breath. Am I maximizing the utilization of the breath that he's given me? And I began to think about some things that were undone or incomplete. And I began to cry out to Yah and thank him for allowing his Holy Spirit to bring to my remembrance and to bring to me the reality that I need to enforce my breath a little more aggressively in this hour, because the Bible talks about us redeeming the time. Now, the Father is the restorer of the soul, but there's a conversation about us redeeming the time because the days are evil. And so when we look at the things that we have discussed today, these beginnings, the beginning of the relationship begins with the breath of Yah in that opening of Genesis. And I believe we're in chapter 3 or heading over into chapter 4. We're going to read the rest of these verses tonight. It opens up with his breath. It opens up with him breathing and creating from this breath. And so it began to impress upon me even more so the responsibility of the breath. Listen, we can't just say whatever we want to say and do whatever we want. Responsibility with the breath that's been given us. I mean, when you think about what the word says about the Mashiach's return, the Son of Man who will deal with this enemy with the breath of his mouth, the blast of the breath of his mouth. The word is a weapon. Our tongues are literal swords. They're literal weapons. So we have to be mindful of how we wield the weapon that we've been given, and we have to make sure that we're directing it in the right direction towards the enemy, towards the enemy that we are dealing with internally, that we begin to speak to those things internally to align ourselves with the will and the plan of Yah for our life, because of course we know that we're not to be ignorant of the will of Yah concerning our life, because there is an enemy, and this enemy, as a roaring lion, is roaming. And what is this enemy that is roaming, seeking whom he may devour? Of course, we talked about it a little bit earlier. We're thinking about this enemy that's external, that's outside of us, that is roaming. But when we look at the word of Yah and we look at the dynamics of how things visit the generations, right? It's not a literal this is not a literal lion. This is a concept. This is an ideology that has been given breath, that has been given life, that's been given an activation to move through a family line and to try to introduce itself to everybody it can, to try to bring under the subjection or under the power of that thing those that it desires to bring under its power. But the thing about it is that we, as the sons of Yah, are enlivening altars. We are enlivening entities. We're creating entities and creating deities. We don't even realize that this is what we're doing because we haven't fully understood the authorization or the power that we possess. But we are enlivening things. We are creating things. And we have to be mindful of the things that we are enlivening and creating. Now, my brother's resting tonight. He had several different engagements tonight, so we're going to let him rest tonight, but we're going to jump into this thing. But this breath is so important, and I love the discussion that my brother has about the breath. Is the breath good? Is it good breath or is it bad breath? That's the reality. Are we utilizing the breath that we've been given to glorify Yah? Are we using the breath that we've been given, or are we sitting somewhere whining? When I think about this whining and complaining, I think about the Hebrew children who are walking in this new freedom, but they're in a place that is challenging. But the place that is there that is challenging them is to change them. It's not to crush them. It's not to crush them into destruction. It's not to destroy them, but it's to challenge them to change. It's something that the Father wanted to do on the inside of him. Yes, he could take them out of Egyptian captivity, but the goal was to take Egyptian captivity out of them. It's one thing to bring us out, but it's another thing to bring in us, out of us, right? And that has to be a focal point, because as I'm reading back through Genesis, this dynamic is very strong to me. It's very strong to me that this breath is very invaluable. It's very important. So when we look at something that Adam said, he said, we were talking about the nakedness earlier. He said, well, the word said that they were both naked and not ashamed originally, right? So we're just thinking about clothes, but it's not talking about clothes. Everything was open. There was nothing to hide. This is the conversation about the nakedness. And the question is, in this hour, what is it that is being hidden, or that we think is being hidden? Because everything is naked before him. That's what the word says. Everything is naked before him. So it's a moot point to try to hide anything from him, because he sees it all. So when Adam finally is in this place, he's eaten of the thing, he's partaken of the thing that he was told not to partake of. Now the father is walking as he normally walks in the cool of the day, and he's looking for the relationship. He's not looking for Adam to be performing something. He's not looking for what Adam, what he does. He's looking for the relationship. He's looking for the conversation. He's looking to pour something. He's looking to see the manifestation of himself in his son, and his son is hiding as if his father doesn't know where he's located. He asks, "Where are you?" And Adam says, "I hid myself. I hid from you." And so this is what the nakedness is all about. And I believe that this thing that the Father is calling us into in this hour, right in the midst of galactic prayer, is to bring us back to the beginning, to bring us back to the beginning so that we understand the value of what we've been given. There was this conversation with the master is so powerful because, like I told you, the first Adam, people try to, it's no comparison here. The first Adam had no mother. He had no earthly father. And he still made the decision to do the opposite. But what I love about the Father, excuse me, I'm on the other side of this thing. Y'all hear me? I'm really clear. I'm clearing up a little bit. What I love about the Father is his confidence to allow us, his confidence in himself to allow man to choose. He's confident and comfortable enough with himself to understand his value and what he's bringing to the table to say, you make a decision. So when we talk a little bit about free will, a lot of people think, oh, well, free will means you could just do whatever you want to do. You absolutely can. But the free will, the reason why the Father allows free will, we talked about it a little bit earlier, it's like this pre-qualification, right? Yeah, there are a lot of things that are already established concerning you. There are a lot of things that are already put in place concerning you, some things that are predestined for you. But you have the option to opt out of all that. You have the option to opt out of everything that's been performed on your behalf. You have the option to pay your own debt. You have the option to do your own thing. He's confident enough in himself to allow you to do that. But there are consequences. And a lot of the time when we're walking out life, we are in that place of ignorance. And sometimes it's arrogance for some. But most of those of us who have relationship with Yah, that actually were introduced and desired to have a relationship and wanted to love him and allow him to love us, there were things that we weren't taught. So in our ignorance, we were walking out some things, right? I talked about it earlier. Oh, God gonna just have to forgive me for this. Just ignorant, not understanding the value of the relationship and not understanding that my imagination had been contaminated with some information that just wasn't good information. But my desire was still towards Yah. I just didn't have the information to move in wisdom of the relationship. But in the wisdom of this relationship, I don't have to try to perform anything because all I have to do is accept the work that was finished for me, and I can just walk out what's been done. I can walk in those same footsteps that were laid out for me by the Mashiach. I can follow the instruction, follow the direction that he went as a recipient of the fullness of this commitment and relationship and covenant that is between me and him, and see the manifestation of that in my everyday life. Practically see the manifestation of that in my everyday life. I always share this, and I share it often because it's something that I really want people to get, that when I stepped over into, and when I say stepped over into, it wasn't because I figured it out, it's because he revealed himself to me in this area. When he revealed himself to me in the area of the moeds, or the appointed times. I know y'all getting ready for y'all pagan rituals, right? But when that was no longer a thing for me, because see, when we talk about the power of choice, when we talk about this free will, he presented something to me, and I desired to know more. So in my desire to know more, it overrode everything I'd ever learned. And I think about Paul when I say this to you. He said, I count everything that I've ever known as dung. It's crap to me. It doesn't mean anything. And you understand, Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was brought up in the Hebrew culture. So he knew Torah, he knew all of these different things. But how he was utilizing this word was to persecute those that were followers of the way. What way? They were the followers of the way of the Mashiach. That people that understood who he was and what he had done and what that meant for them. And they were walking out the way that he had set before them. And this was causing great consternation and great upset in the realm of the industrial complex called religion. It's that same complex that killed the Mashiach, that crucified him, because it bore light that pierced the darkness that they were operating in. And it brought pride came up, and irritation came up. You got to understand that when you choose to do the thing that the Father has called you to do, when you choose to walk this thing out, you're going to ruffle feathers. And a lot of people aren't willing to walk it out because they want to be accepted, and they want to be, they want people to see them a certain way. They're concerned about the people more than they're concerned about the relationship. When you look at Adam in this situation, he was concerned about himself. He was concerned about flesh. He was concerned about Eve. He was concerned about this desire that he had more than he was concerned about the relationship. And this is where we wind up in these spaces, right? And we wind up in the struggle of things. That doesn't mean that we're not going to ever be challenged, because you got to remember that the Mashiach was led of the Holy Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted. And this is why the word says in Hebrews that he was tempted in all points, like as we are, yet without sin. Tempted means that he was drawn away of his own lust and enticed. However, in his drawn away of his own lust and enticed, there were some things that he desired, and he understands the feeling of that infirmity, but he made a decision based on the divine information that he had, that had been given to him. This is why it's so important for us to read the word. This is why it's so important for us to understand the beginnings. This is why it's so important for us to follow the instructions, because Torah don't mean law. Torah means the doctrine of Yah. It means instruction. It means loving instruction, right? And a lot of things were translated the way they were translated for people's utilization at a later time. And that's a whole nother conversation. But where we are right now is dealing with the imagination, the contamination or the uncontaminated imagination, because when we're dealing with what we're forming in our mind, it is based on the information that has been given to us. We don't have anything else to work with but what's been given. And this is why we have to always be hungering and thirsting after righteousness, not our own way of doing things, but the way that the Father's designed it for it to be done, so that we get the maximum benefits and the maximum results. Let's keep reading in Genesis. I got a whole lot of stuff here that I want to talk to you about. Some things that the Father, when I was telling you about that time that I set that clock for just me to just lay in his presence and just rest there, just to rest there. And he began to talk to me about a great many things. But I want to finish reading Genesis, and I want to finish reading these passages, because this is what this conversation was all about. This is what we're doing. Now, I don't know that we'll be doing 4 and 5 hours every week. I don't know. But we're going to do what we're going to do. And I'm not from the church industrial complex if I'm going to get y'all in an hour and get y'all out, because I feel like this is valuable. This is important. And we must do this, because people will go to the movies and sit for 2 hours. But when it comes to the word, we in and out, right? No, this is the time. This is the place that we need to spend time. This is the place that we need to fellowship, right around this right here, And I'm thinking that even as we are doing Torah again, I want to bring you guys back on so that you can share in this time with me, and that if you have questions and those kind of things, we can kind of address the questions, because this is a time of study. Reading Torah, reading the beginning is a time of study. It's a time of reflection. It's a time of revelation. And so I want to be able to allow you that space and that time as well. Blessings to all those that are coming on. Let's go back to Genesis. I think I left it in the place that I was. Yeah, let's go here. So they're in the garden. We're in chapter 3. I believe we are, we're in verse 6. We talked about Ra'ah. this desire that the woman had with her eyes. You know, we know that all that's in the earth is the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. That combination is deadly, right? And those are the areas that the adversary works the most. Those are the areas that we are challenged by the most. What we can brag about, the pride of life, the lust of the eyes, what satisfies us, all of these, personal desires that have absolutely nothing to do with glorifying Yah, just the personal things. But she's desiring this thing and she's giving it, she's taking it and she's giving it to her husband. There's an opening. The adversary sees this opening. And again, this is a conversation that's being had. So I told you the adversary's greatest superpower um, is his ability to try to persuade. It's persuasion. And I guess you guys used a couple of different words and they were all correct this morning. But the power of persuasion is his greatest weapon. He desires to persuade or to convince or to sway people in his direction. But there are all of these ideas and concepts. And this is why the word tells us that we're to bring every thought into captivity, because we're constantly thinking about things. And I told you, thoughts become things. And when we don't deal with those things that the thoughts produce by bringing into captivity every thought, then they build up these strongholds. And this is an internal affair. It's not an external affair. It's internal. And this is what, this is the whole goal of darkness, is to invade this space that we call the sanctuary, to sully or to dirty up or to make unclean the temple, the sanctuary, right? Because this is the place that Yah desires to dwell. He's not looking for a building to dwell in. So even when we go into these different spaces and say we're inviting him in, no, he should already be invited because you brought him with you. There's no need to invite him into a space that he already dwells, right? So if we are the temple, then we're not looking for him to fill a space when we're in it, because he's in us and we're filling the space, right? So it's, we just got to deal with these concepts and these ideologies because they open up avenues for other things to operate. They open up avenues for other operations, just as we see right here in Genesis. And it says here in verse 7, and the eyes of them both were open. Both of their eyes were open. And they knew that they were naked. They knew that they were exposed. This is not about clothes. Excuse me. They knew that they were exposed at that point. They were exposed. They began to try to, what's the word? They began to try to do acts, to do works. I'm going to sew these fig leaves together and make myself an apron. So it became about an outward thing because they knew that they were exposed. So now everything about who they were became shameful, right? And it says that they heard the voice of Yah walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Now, I don't know about you, but to hear a voice walking is a serious matter. This is a very supernatural place. This is not just a normal place. Even though they were in this place of the realization, their eyes open, they're exposed, they've done a thing, right? But their eyes are open, and now they still hear the Father walking in the garden in the cool of the day. So this says to me that when they stepped over into this space, they were not immediately disconnected. They were not immediately punished. They were not immediately banished, right? But they could still hear because they were still sons. They could still hear. And I believe with all my heart that just knowing the character of Yah and just having been in relationship with Yah for the time I've been in relationship, that his desire was for them to just come clean. But what happens with us is that we start pointing fingers. Let's keep looking. What happens with us is we don't take accountability. And it's when we refuse to take accountability that we wind up in these cycles of destruction. Because the word talks about sin being death. Now, he already promised them that in the day that you eat thereof, you will surely die. Now, that death didn't mean a physical death yet, but the death of the actual animation of that breath that I gave you. You're going to work by the sweat of your brow. You're going to have to do some things differently now because now you're not operating from the place that I formed you from. You're not operating from that place anymore. And so they heard the voice of Yah walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife, the word says, hid themselves from the presence of Yah amongst the trees of the garden. Y'all go and look at that, because trees in the midst of the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And now we have this entity, this shining one that is having a conversation about and giving this knowledge, right? Which is the knowledge of good and evil, how to operate. Because when we read down further, you're going to hear the Father ask, "Who told you we're naked?" A lot of times, what we've been taught is that it's asking, "Who told you you didn't have on no clothes?" No, he's asking, "Who taught you how to do what you're doing? Who taught you the craftiness of trying to do a thing and then hide it, trying to function on this level and then act like it's covered? It's not covered. It's visible. I can see it." And so what I believe the Father wanted really was for them to come clean, but they didn't come clean. Adam pointed the finger. Eve was deceived, but Adam pointed the finger. And I say this all the time because the man is the head. He is the one that is the leader ultimately at the end of the day. I believe that Adam had a desire for something that was going on in that garden already. It was something that he saw, because remember, he was to cultivate and keep it, to protect it and to cultivate it, to dress and to keep it, to cultivate it and to protect it. So everything in the garden had to be cultivated and protected, right? But there was something that he was after, but he didn't go after it by himself. He waited until he had help to go after it. That's a whole nother conversation in and of itself. So we got to be mindful how we are aiding and abetting other people. We got to be mindful of how we're helping them, right? This is dealing with the relationship between the man and the woman, but across the board, we must be mindful of how we're helping other people. Are we aiding and abetting them to do the thing that is against the Father? Or are we saying to them, this is not the will of Yah? I got people in my life right now, and I just, I don't care how many times I say it, I just don't believe some things that are being done, because I've been in this space. And because I've been in a space and I've done some things the wrong way several times because of my ignorance, I didn't know certain things. Now that I know those things, when I see certain things, I will say something, especially to people I love, because some people didn't do that for me in other seasons of my life. People were just frustrated with me. They were angry with me. They were mad at me. These are this is the consensus of the conversations that I've heard about some things that I've decided in my life. People were mad. They were mad at you. And I'm like, why didn't they say nothing? What were you mad for? Why didn't you say something? Right? So when I see something, when it pertains to my brothers or my sisters, I say something. I don't hold back. Now, they might not always like what I say because they want to do what they want to do. But listen, I'm going to say something. You know why? Because I love them. And the last thing they're going to say, the last thing they're not going to say is, you saw me going down this road and you said nothing. If anything, they're going to say to me, you did tell me that. Got people that tell me that in a heartbeat. You did say that, So I'm not going to press the issue, but I'm going to say something, because I'm not going to aid and abet you to destroy your life or destroy what you got going. I'm not going to aid and abet you to be thrown into a ditch. I'm just not going to aid and abet you. So here we are. They hear the voice of Yah walking in the cool of the day. They hide themselves from the presence of Yah. Oh my God, what we don't understand is that when we're doing the thing that we're doing and we're not coming clean of the thing that we've done, we begin to hide ourselves from his presence. Now, the fact that they were hiding themselves from his presence is the same thing that the master was dealing with in that Garden of Gethsemane. You got to think about this. He wasn't concerned about the death. It was his appointment. He knew that that's what he had to do. He was okay with the death. But what was the issue for him? The sticking issue was, I got to be separated from your presence. I've never been separated from your presence, and I've never desired to be separated from your presence. So now, if I carry the weight of this sin of humanity, if I carry this weight, if I am the final sacrifice for their sin, if I am the propitiation for that, you can't look at sin. Sin and you don't go together. So you're going to have to turn your back on me, which is why he cries out, "Why have you forsaken me?" Right? This is what the cry was about, because he had to be separated from his father. Now look at this. Once you separate yourself from the presence of Yahweh, you're not animated in the way that you need to be animated. You're not divinely animated anymore. You're on another kind of animation. But they hide themselves from his presence amongst the trees of the garden. Makes me think about Mount Sinai too. When this conversation, Yah brings all the people together, they get themselves together, they get cleaned up, and they come to the mountain, and they get all these instructions how they're going to conduct themselves in this place. And he begins to speak. He begins to, breathe. And as he's breathing, the mountain is on fire and is shaking. And, they're hearing things that shouldn't be audible, right? They're seeing things that shouldn't be visual, right? All of their senses, the Bible talks about our senses being trained. All of their senses are doing something other than what it would normally do. And they say, wait, whoa, we pulling back from that. And I'm telling you, it's nothing like the presence of Yah. I believe that the Father wants to reveal himself to his people. If you've ever had an encounter with Yah, if you've ever had encounters with Yah, then you understand the longing and the desire to continue in that place of encounter. Moshe said it like this: "Show me your glory." There was something that every son wanted to see. There was a place where he was revealing himself to them. And in every age, you heard the conversation with Moshe. Said, "Listen, I didn't reveal myself like I'm revealing myself to you, to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. I revealed myself." It's a progressive thing. Over time, I'm revealing myself in different ways. I'm advancing the revelation of who I am. And I didn't reveal myself the same way to them. But it's a longing that a son has to not be separated from the presence of Yah, because we know in his presence is fullness of joy. At his right hand are pleasures. We're not looking for anything, because we're fulfilled. We are fulfilled by the presence of Yah. But what happens when we're separated from that presence is we have to begin to find fulfillment in other things, which is this fruit that they partook of, this consumption that was had here began to be more valuable than what the Father had already spoken, what he had already given. It became more valuable than that. And so now there's a separation. And that separation is death. Anybody in this room ever been divorced? I don't care how awful a person was or whatever it is, once you're connected with somebody, that separation, it is a place. It's a pulling, it's a tearing. It's something that is a thing that the Father never desired us to go through. He never desired it. But we're coming into the wisdom. And a lot of us that have gone through that place, we're coming into the wisdom of how the Father works in relationship. And now our eyes are open, and now we're seeing things differently. And now some things we just won't accept. In some ways we just won't go, because our allegiance is first to him. And if our allegiance is first to him, then everything else has to align with our allegiance to him. That's how we identify the purpose, if a thing fits our purpose. I have a saying: if it don't fit my purpose, it don't fit my life. And there's a purpose that's over our lives. So anything that doesn't fit the purpose is there to disrupt the purpose, is there to distort the purpose, right? And so we have to be mindful in this hour that our first love is the thing that we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose the first love, because that first love is the instruction for our life. It's when you look in that garden, we talked about the rivers, we talked about the gold, we talked about the aggregate, the jewels, and all of this stuff. And there was an abundance there in his presence. But it was based on the relationship. So it goes directly to the fact that the scripture says that we're to seek first the kingdom of Yah and his righteousness, and all the things will be added. There is an order here. In the relationship, this is the provision. Brother brought up earlier Well, now it's 12 o'clock. It's a whole new day. The brother was bringing up earlier yesterday about the prodigal, the one that they call the prodigal son. There's an order of relationship. As long as he was in relationship with his father, he never saw the pig pen. But the moment he took and squandered what was given to him, the moment he took the valuables of his father and began to squander it, he came up short. He came up nothing and wound up in a pig pen, having to come to himself like, wait a minute. Now, this is not the perspective that I see myself. This is not the place that I've always been. In my father's house, even the slaves are in a better place than this. He had to come to himself. And this is the return. This is the return. Let's keep reading. It says here that they heard the voice of Yah walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yah amongst the trees of the garden. You got to delve into that, amongst the trees of the garden. And Yah called unto Adam and said unto him, where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was exposed. I'm going to use the word exposed here because naked don't mean I'm just unclothed. I was exposed, and I tried to hide. And he said, who told you that you were exposed? Who showed you how to do this thing that brought this exposure? I'm going to go to this word naked real quick because I just want to read to you. I want to pull it up. Who Aaron is the word. Aaron is the word. And this word Aaron deals with nakedness, but this is how they translated it, nudity and nakedness. But we got to go further than that because the etymology of the word is not that. It's aram, which means to be subtle, to be shrewd, to be crafty. This is why study is so important, right? Because on the surface, you might see something, but that ain't, you got to dig deeper than just the surface in order to get the understanding. Who showed you how to be subtle and shrewd and crafty like this? Who's been counseling you? Who's been counseling you to function in this way? Because this is not, the breath that I gave you doesn't animate this way. It doesn't animate this way. So you're consuming something else. And I'm talking to somebody I love earlier today, and they brought this to bear. And this is a reality that in a marital relationship, this is real because it's not just about intuition. Women know when a man has stepped out. Women know when somebody is doing something different. You know why? Because their breath is different. How they talk to you is different. How they animate towards you is different. So now you want to know where you been. Who you been talking to? Because how you're communicating with me is not the normal communication that we have. And this is what the Father's talking about. Where you been? Who been talking to you? He wants him to expose the conversation, expose the issue here. Don't hide from it. Expose it. And this is what the Father's desire is for us. Listen, return. I'm exposing the issue to you. I'm going to expose some things to you so that you understand your need for me and you return. Yes, I've given you free will. But that is the pre-qualification. Okay? But now you got to qualify by accepting and having these things that I have ordained for you. You accepting this work. That's the pre-qualification is there. But how do I accept the offer, right? If I don't accept the offer, then the pre-qualification means nothing for me. It means nothing for me. But if I accept the offer, that means I come into alignment with it. And I am providing or responding in kind to the pre-qualification, which qualifies me completely or releases what I am seeking. It releases what I'm seeking. This is what happens. Verse 11. He said, who told you how to do this? Who taught you this? Who's been counseling you? Has thou eaten of the tree? Now he knows what he's asking. It's like parents. I always tell my children, when I ask you a question, I know the answer. I tell my grandbabies the same thing. I already know the answer to the question I'm asking you. I'm giving you the opportunity to look at where you are and to state the truth of the matter. And then to come out of alignment with the thing that you were in alignment with. He said, did you eat of the tree? Whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat. Did you eat that thing that I told you don't eat? And the man said, the woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree and I did eat. Oh boy. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. He didn't want to take ownership of this. And this is really important because as a man, women, as a man, this is important. I mean, as a woman, this is important to know about a man. A man that'll own something is a man that will operate properly. A man that won't own anything, that is always pointing the finger, that is always casting blame, that's not a man. That's not a man that's going to operate, that's not operating, that's not a man that's operating under divine breath. That's what I want to say. Okay. He pointed the finger at the woman. Now, before, he was like, you flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones. Before, he was in the place of honoring her. And now he's pointing the finger at her because he doesn't want to own where he is, right? I think it's the worst place to be, not to own a thing. Because when we don't own it, we can't be delivered. You can't be delivered from something you don't own, right? There's no insurance for something you don't own. So all the finished work and all of that is not insuring anything because you don't own it. It said he bore our sins. That's something you own. And our transgression, that's something you own. That's something we own, right? Surely he has borne our transgression and our sins. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we were healed. That means that there was something on us, that the work that he did brought us into a place of freedom. But if we never own what was on us, then we can't step into the freedom that's been provided for us. And this is where Adam missed this thing and got kicked out of this space that was created for him. And so the Father says to the woman, what is this that you've done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me and I did eat. It's a fact. He did beguile her. She was not, she had some things going on with her where she didn't have some clarity for some reason, because she added, don't eat it and don't touch it. And that the Father didn't say that. He didn't say that. He said, don't eat it. But Yah said unto the serpent, because you have done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Nakash, this was I believe, an angelic agency that was in this space, one that had been exalted to a level of being able to contain information and to contain knowledge, but he got a little flippant in the lip, because this is what happens when we make a decision. Just like humans make decisions, angelic agencies make decisions, and we see that throughout scripture. We'll get to chapter 6 soon, and you'll see that these angels, these watchers, these angelic agents came down to Mount Hermon, and they made decisions to do a thing that was unthinkable, to do a thing that was commanded of them not to do, right? Sleeping with the women and having these babies that were creating another seed, right? This is what the enemy is always after. He's after you as a seed. The enemy is after, darkness is after you as a seed. All of these ideologies and concepts that invade the space of mankind are for the purpose of seed, right? And so the Father says to the serpent, you're going to be cursed above all the cattle. He gives the curse out, right? But he says something, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman. This is going to be your greatest adversary. And between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. That's a big conversation. The enmity piece between the adversary and the woman. And a lot of people are, you hear people talk about this all the time, while women are a little bit more spiritually inclined. It seems that women are a little more spiritually inclined at times than men are, because we're the enemy's worst nightmare, for real. He's always seeking. Even when you think about how the adversary is doing what he's doing with men wanting to be women, it's this thing of covetousness. It's a covetous space. I want to be what you are. I want to have what you have. I don't want you to be all that you are and to gain all the benefits of who you are. I want to gain the benefits, right? I want to take that from you. But there were some other things that were given here: the great multiplication of the sorrow and conception, and the sorrow and bringing forth children, and the desire being towards the husband and him ruling over her. Now I want to say this because this is a part of what happens when we are not following the instruction of Yah. So now, those of us that have come into obedience and aligning ourselves with that instruction, these things don't apply to us. This is a result of disobedience. But people have been trying to live this out forever. You know, I've known a place of no pain in birth. I've known a place of very little pain in birth. And I've known people that had no pain. They just popped out a baby. You know, and the Bible talks about the Hebrew women um, being very aggressive in their birthing, and they don't go through all of the panting and all of the long suffering and all that. It's a happening. It just happens, right? There's something that happens, things that happen as it pertains to a curse that don't happen outside of it. But if we don't have the understanding that we're not under the curse when we're in the relationship and when we're in covenant, then we will be walking out curse that has not been applied to us. And that's another trick of the enemy, to be walking out curse that has not been applied. We've got to awaken to the realization that we've been delivered from the curse. And so now we don't have to walk out these levels of pain in these areas of our life. Unto Adam, he says, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, and sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of your life, all the days of your life, the life that you are choosing, your life, right? This is important because a lot of people try to take this and say that men shouldn't listen to women. That's not what this is saying. This is an issue of Adam hearkening to the voice of his wife over the voice of Yah. There's something that Yah specifically said to him before she had even showed up. And now he uses her as an opportunity to do something that he wanted to do all along. He said, because you decided to listen to her over me, then there's going to be a challenge. There's going to be this curse concerning the ground. It's not going to respond to you. Understand the thing I was talking about before about the breath. Being made in the image and likeness of Yah means we get the response that he gets concerning the things that we're facing, right? And we can see this in, when we get to Isaac, we'll see that, because there was a thing that had been a family thing. When the land goes in the famine, we go to Egypt. But Yah told them, don't go to Egypt. He said, stay in the land. Now, who in their right mind going to stay in the land where there's famine? And not just stay in the land, but to sow in the ground that's dry, to sow in that land. But I believe that the Father gave him a revelation of how to create a system that land in that season. And so when we talk about that, we're talking about the wells that were created. We're talking about all of these things. He made him stay in that space. And so, but the word says that he got 100-fold in that place that everybody else left because they couldn't produce anything there. They couldn't produce anything. So he's not saying, he's saying to him, listen, the ground is usually supposed to respond to you, because when you're remember in the garden, it says that the trees yielded their fruit, right? And now that you've stepped outside of the relationship and you're mishandling my breath, now the thing that should usually respond to you is not responding to you anymore. You're going to have sorrow, and the ground is not going to respond to you. And by the sweat of your brow, you're going to eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread till thou return unto the ground. For out of it was thou taken, for dust thou art. Remember, I told you, without the breath of Yah, we're just dust, we're just particles, just moving particles, right? And unto that you shall return. And Adam called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. Unto Adam also and to his wife did Yah make coats of skins. Now this is important, and clothe them. Now this is important because, like I said earlier, I don't believe that, this was about him killing the animal and making skins. Let's go to skins. The word is or, and it is the skin of men. This is dealing with creating a tougher skin, because it deals with hide here. It talks about leather. But when you look at your skin and you understand that you have a dermis and epidermis, you have levels to your skin, he had to send him into this new place in order for him to make him go out into this new uh, space, into this new realm of operation. He had to give him something tough enough to be able to operate, tough enough to be able to survive. And so this skin wasn't about, leather, although I really love leather. I do. It wasn't about that. It was him giving them what they needed to be able to survive in the environment they were going into. And Yah said, behold, the man has become as one of us to know good and evil. He knows how to operate these things. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore Yah sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. Now you remember in the beginning, he said there was no man to till the ground. Well, he wasn't saying that it wasn't a man. In other words, I haven't formed one to do it. It just wasn't a necessity at that time. Now it's a necessity to till the ground. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. He was not interested in them getting back in there and eating of the tree of life and remaining in that state. He never desired us to be in that state in the first place. And this is the beginning of salvation. So now we're about to look into this thing that is produced out of sin. Let's look at this now. Chapter 4. And Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. I believe they were things. They had, these are there, there's the appointment is there. These were their appointments. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto Yah. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And Yah had respect unto Abel and to his offerings. We have made this about so many things, but the reality here is that because of this sin, we now have this contradiction here in the bloodline. We got this contradiction. And so Cain is operating in this contradiction because he doesn't bring the best of what he has. He just brings something. And this is such a serious place because we cannot just bring to Yah whatever we want. And we see that throughout the scripture, how adamant he is about what we're bringing and why we're bringing it, right? All the way over in the Testaments revealed, the revelation of the original Testament, the original covenant, we see that Ananias and Sapphira, was it Ananias and Sapphira? Yeah. They are in agreement with something that Paul is doing in the midst of the body of believers, something that's been impressed upon him. And now the believers are bringing things because every man is going to have something, and nobody's going to be without. And they say they're going to sell their house for so much. But then when they get the money, they decide they're going to keep something back. The same thing happened with Aaron's sons, his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, right? Here they are. They are seeing all of this glory and seeing all of these things that are happening as a result of the sacrifice and as a result of what the Father is doing in the priesthood. And they desire to see it. So they go and they get censers and they're getting ready to go and create this fire. Listen, we can't just bring whatever we want. There are instructions, there are boundaries, there are things that have been put in place. And I was talking about this earlier, and this is so important because there are a lot of people that have been churched, but they have not been changed. There are a lot of people that are religious, but they don't have relationship. And so they have an expectation of Yah, but they have no investment in the relationship. But they have an expectation, an unhealthy expectation that he's going to do something for them when they have done nothing for him, right? Their appointments, one was a keeper of the ground, and the other was a keeper of the sheep, and the other was a tiller of the ground. Here we go with the tilling. Cain was a tiller. That's something in that, right? He was operating under the curse for sure. But Abel was a keeper of the sheep. So when you think about this and you see the offerings that they brought It says Abel brought the firstling of his flock. In other words, he had a respect toward Yah. And let's go back to this prophetic significance here, because I told you that time is cyclical, it's not just linear. And so when we understand that Yah or Job is the oldest book, we saw sacrifice there. There has always been a landmark. There has always been an ancient landmark. And so the Father just recycles the landmarks throughout the age and the history of mankind so that we are able to identify what the boundary lines are, right? How in the world would Abel or Cain know to bring an offering if it wasn't something that was already established? But we don't really see this enforced in this space until we see Moshe go up to the mount and bring down these tablets, right? When we see that, we see that there are some things that are enforced. Build the tabernacle. Here are the specs for the tabernacle. Here are the articles for the tabernacle. You know, then he has men that are able to build, that are anointed to build and to teach, so that the articles of the tabernacle are made, right? But before that, these people were not under the law of Moshe. Moshe was not born yet, so there was something here. There was a boundary. There were boundary lines here. There were instructions here, and they brought. But it was the spirit of what they brought, the spirit in which they brought what they brought. And so it says here, the Abel brought of the firstling of his flock. I'm in Genesis 4:4, and of the fat thereof. And Yah had respect unto Abel and to his offering. He had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering, he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And Yah said unto Cain, what's wrong with you, boy? Why you feeling some kind of way? And what's wrong with your face? Countenance falling. If thou doest well, if you do well, you'll be accepted, won't you? And if you don't do well, sin, here we go, lieth at the door. This is not something that's literally at the door. It's a conversation about this entryway that we give a thing. Remember, I was talking to you about thoughts become things, right? He's considering some things, and Yah is confronting him about the consideration, about the decision that he's about to make. And he's telling him, listen, if you don't take hold of this thing, if you don't bring this thing under subjection, it's going to rule you. It's going to master you. It has a desire for you. But if you can do the thing I'm telling you to do, if you'll follow the instruction, you will rule over it. You understand? Verse 8, and Cain talked with Abel, his brother. Now, he's heard what Yah said. Yeah, he got the word of Yah. He got it. Remember, I told you, this is not an external thing. This is an internal affair. He is operating off of a seed in his generations. Cain talked with Abel, his brother. And it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. Now, he had a conversation with him. I wonder what the conversation was about. Because he could have just asked him, what did you do for Yah to receive you and your offering? I need to know what you're doing. I need to know how you're operating. And this is a place that we live in right now, because people will desire you to do a thing for them, but they won't put you up to do it because they want to receive. He wanted to receive accolades for something that he wasn't even doing. And he didn't even inquire to fix the situation, but he wanted to kill. He wanted to kill his brother. He wanted to put out his brother's appointment. He wanted to stop the appointment of his brother because he did not decide to do something differently. It says, and Yah said unto Cain, where's your brother Abel? Here we go again. Listen, here we go again with these questions. I am inclined to believe it is something that we've been talking about prayer. You know, oftentimes when we talk about supplication, people often think it's something they coming up with to ask Yah. But I believe that there's a place of maturity in that place. Like in immaturity, you're asking a bunch of questions. But I believe that in maturity, the Father places things upon your heart to inquire about because it's something he's trying to get to you. He's asking these questions. Where's your brother? And he said, I know not. I don't know. I'm not. Am I my brother's keeper? Am I in charge of him? You're going to get smart with Yah for real. And he said, what have you done? I'm not asking you a question because I don't know the answer. What have you done? And then he begins to say, the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. This is why it's so important that we utilize the breath properly, because nothing is hidden from Yah. So when we don't use the breath properly, there is a cry, there is a sound, there's a frequency that's being emitted that is very visible. It's very visible to Yah. He can sense it, he can smell it. And not only can he sense and smell it, but all kinds of things can sense and smell. So it's like, when you're in an area, in the waters, and if you cut yourself, if you in waters where shark are, you got to get out the water. Why? Because the shark gonna sense the blood in the water and they coming for it, right? That kind of thing. He said here, he said, when thou tillest the ground. No, he gave him he gave him this curse. He said, what have you done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. So now, because you have spilled this blood on the ground, now you also are cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from your hand. Oh my God. We got to be so mindful. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. Now, seemed like to me, they had come over something. And I got to sneeze. Y'all hold on. Looked like to me, they had come over a place here, because remember it says that he was a tiller of the ground, right? And so there was some yield, there was some fruit there, because he brought fruit, even though he didn't bring the first fruit, even though he didn't bring the best of what he had, there was something there. And so now he's receiving the same curse that his father received. When you till the ground, it's not going to yield unto you her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. Cain said unto Yah, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Oh, here we go. Isn't this what we do? When we do a thing and we don't want to own the thing, and we don't want to repent, and we don't want to turn, we start talking about, this is too much. Why is it so heavy? Why is it so weighty? Well, if you return, the word says, listen, let the sinner, I'm going to pull up this verse, because people always say, his thoughts are not our thoughts. Y'all get stuck there. The word goes further than that. It goes beyond that. It's saying that there is a way for his thoughts to be our thoughts. Isaiah chapter 55, starting at verse 8. But he says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. He's dealing with the fact that I'm in a different space. So if you want to operate on this level, you gotta come into me. This is a relational thing. He says here, let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts, that he might return unto me. What is he returning to? He's returning unto the right thoughts. He's returning unto the right ways. It's not just his thoughts ain't our thoughts, and so we just go on with our life. No. The word declared that we should have the mind of the Mashiach. And what was the mind of the Mashiach? That he thought it not robbery to be equal with Yah. He operated in the mind of Yah. Do you know that the spirit of Yah is the actual mind of Yah? He knows the deep things of Yah. He reveals the deep things of Yah. So how do you think that the things that are hidden, or that are secret things that are hidden in Yah, we find it, that we have this desire to go and search it out and to pull it out? Because the Holy Spirit allows us to do that, because the spirit of Yah dwells in us. So the mind of Yah is revealed to us in order to bring us into the alignment that we need to be in, to see the manifestation that we are seeking, that the Father has desired to be released in the earth. He said, my punishment is greater than I can bear. He said, behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. He knew something about being separated from Yah, even as the master did, right? Death is a result of separation. And Yah said unto him, therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And Yah set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. He said, no, I want you to live this thing out. I want you to walk out what I have declared concerning you, because you made a choice. And Cain went out from the presence of Yah. It's this going out from the presence of Yah that keeps coming up. I'm telling you tonight, you ought to go to sleep Or when you wake up in the morning and you listen to this, you ought to go throughout your day just identifying with the reality of what his presence brings, and never desire out of his presence, because this is the separation. Sin separates us from his presence. And where his presence is not, there is captivity, there is bondage. He said he went out from the presence of Yah and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mahujael, and Mahujael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech. And Lamech took unto him two wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the other name of the other was Zillah. And Ada bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Ubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. Now look at this. We're seeing now the expansion of understanding and identity of things. There's a sound that's now getting ready to be emitted from this appointment of persons, right? There's an appointment here. That we see people stepping into appointments on the other side of Cain, who knew his wife and conceived and bare Enoch. And we'll come back to that at next week. And it says here, and Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For Yah, she said, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of Yah. I just want you to look at the order of, that is here. Yah keeps providing one that he would call to represent him. There's always a call for representation. He's always looking for one to represent him. And so after we see Cain killing Abel and leaving from the presence of Yah, and being this one that would roam, now he starts to birth things. And as he's birthing things, the things that he is birthing are gifted. They have these appointments, right? And even in the midst of this, Adam and Eve bear Seth, whom Yah replaces Cain that was slain. And this son is the beginning again. As this is always his thing. He's always placing one or someone. Anytime he wants to shift something, he's going to use somebody to shift it. It's not going to just shift. No more than a blessing just falls out of the sky. It's not going to just shift. He uses mankind to express his image in the earth. Let's go here real quick. I'm going to go to the next one, and I'm going to continue to read. I see y'all quiet this morning, and that's okay. Just listen in. It's okay, because I want to get through here. Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6. Let's go there. We could do a rough go over next week of some things, but I want to get through this tonight. Isaiah chapter 6. Okay. After that, we're going to Proverbs 23:7. Isaiah chapter 6. Oh, something about keeping your word, my God. And this is what came up to me when when I was rereading Genesis and seeing how the Father desires to continue to be seen a certain way, how he continues to desire relationship, and how death is the necessity in order for us to see. We have to die to ourselves, or something has to die in order for us to see him. And it brought me to Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. And this is familiar to you if you read the scripture. It says, in the year the king Uzziah died, I saw also Yah sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. This is so important because sometimes we see a thing more valuable. Remember we were talking about Adam and the woman at that moment who this conversation was being had, these ideas or these concepts were coming at them. Sometimes it's something in front of us, and the idea or the concept of that thing is so glorious, right? Because kings were not wimpy. They had a glory about them. He says, in the year the king Uzziah died, that's when I saw Yah. I couldn't see him before then because I was beholding the glory of King Uzziah. But when he died, I saw Yah sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. I began to have an encounter. I began to have an experience. I'm telling you, there are things that we value or we have valued more than Yah, whether it's relationship, whether it's marriage, whether it's all these things. And I can only speak to the things that I have experienced in my ignorance. I valued a relationship. I valued marriage because I knew I was a wife. But just because I knew I was a wife, I still needed instruction to be what I knew I was, because I told you before, my proper content in the wrong context didn't benefit me. It didn't glorify him. You understand what I'm saying? So it wasn't until the thing died that he was able to see Yah. And this is the hour that things are dying so that we can see him. We got to kill some things in our lives. We got to put it to death. Some of these things we got to put to death just so we can see him in all of his glory, enthroned, high and lifted up. In other words, there was nothing higher than him. Before I saw this glory of King Uzziah, and now that he's gone, I see high and lifted up. I see the exaltation of who my Father is, and I see his glory and this train that is filling the temple. There's something about this train that I learned with the kings. The longer the train was, it was more territory that they possessed, more kingdoms that they had overthrown. And this was the length of the train, the purpose of the length of the train, to signify the length of their authority, right? Let's go here real quick. Proverbs 23:7. This is another verse that came up, and I was reading Genesis from 1 to 4. Proverbs 23:7. Let's go there. And it says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. I just wanted to take that A part of the verse, because when we look back at all of these things that we've seen, Adam, first of all, didn't see himself in the way that he needed to see himself, because if he had seen himself in the way that he needed to see himself, in the way that the Father had formed and fashioned him, then he would have been able to recover from it. But he began to see himself in a different light. And because he began to see himself in this different light because of what he was consuming, he became something other than. And this is the thought that became the thing, right? That became who he was, separated from Yah, right? As a man thinketh, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. These are just the facts. I love the first verse when it talks about, when thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee. That's the thing that Adam should have been considering when this conversation was going on in the garden. And it's a position that we must take when we are identified. But you know what happens with church people, the church industrial complex. See, what happens with that is we go into these places where we're like, oh, the devil ain't about nothing. Oh, I ain't worried about this and I ain't worried about that. Because no, you got to understand, there are enemies. You do have enemies. Foreign and domestic, you got enemies, relatives, or internal things, or things that have been chasing your family lineage. You got enemies. And when I say things that have been chasing, I'm talking about ideas and concepts, not just things with physical legs and physical form, right? We got to come away from some of that, because the reality is we refuse to take responsibility, which is what we just saw in the garden. He didn't take responsibility. for what was operating in him in the moment that something was presented to him. Listen, the master was able to overcome that thing. He spoiled the works of darkness. The Bible says he was tempted in all points like we are, yet without sin. What was in him sustained him. And when he was in that wilderness, after having not eaten for 40 days and 40 nights and being tempted internally, this is a temptation. Temptation ain't external, it's internal. Because it's all about how you're going to respond to what you're seeing, how you're going to respond to what's being said. Are you going to react or are you going to respond? What's the response to what is being said or being done? Right? He came out of that thing in the power of the Spirit because he operated concerning the word that was in him. Well, the problem is that if we're not receiving the word and we're just receiving, slap your neighbor a high five and tell your haters, then that's a problem. If we're just dealing with surface things, with the shallow things, and we're not dealing with the deep things, then people are drowning in this place where they have no revelation of how to live practically every day in their lives. He said, listen, you got to consider diligently. Listen, your adversary ain't no punk. These spirits have been around for a long, they've been following family lineages, these spirits that have been enlivened by family members. I keep going back to that because you got to understand, nothing is operating without authorization. Nothing can operate in our life without authorization. It can't operate. If there is no cause, the curse can't even come. But it doesn't stop the thing from visiting. But when it visits, is there enough in you to deal with it? Because as you think in your heart, how you see yourself in your heart, you might have on all the best clothes, you might live in all the best houses, drive all the best cars, right? Because sometimes we get disenfranchised because Yah puts us in a place, in a holding space, right? And we saying, look, we looking at everything everybody got going on, and we like, what in the world? I'm serving you, and they over there, they doing whatever they doing, and I'm serving you, and I don't have a car, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. He said, listen, you're in a holding pattern. You're in a holding space. I want you to think on some, I want you to meditate so you can manifest. That's all. We take everything so personal. Some of this stuff is really about our protection. It's not even about, what we're thinking it's about. It's about our protection. But as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Those thoughts become things. And those things become strongholds. And these become the enemies that we enliven or embolden. They become emboldened in our lives. They become these strongholds. Right? I'm almost done here, y'all. Let's go. Let's go to the next verse. We're going to come back and refresh. Matthew chapter 6. Let's go there really quickly. Matthew chapter 6. I'm going to read just a piece of some of the things that he talked to me about when I was in that meditation, time of meditation, and just rest in him. Matthew chapter 6. Let's go there. And then I'm going to cut out of here, y'all. Oh, good. We only had an hour and 18 minutes. Okay. I didn't plan to be real long, so we're doing good. This thing is almost, it's come to pass. It's almost past. Matthew chapter 6. Let me see. Where did he take me here? Okay. This is where we are. So he took me into the prayer, the model of the prayer that the Father gave to the Master to share with the disciples. And in the model of the prayer, I want to go to verse 10 in chapter 6. We could go back over this. But I want to go, I want to make sure that was the only spot. Okay. I want to go to verse 10. And this is what it says. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. And that's part of our galactic prayer model. On earth as it is in heaven. The Father has already planned something. And this goes back to the whole concept of free will. Yeah, it's been planned, but we can not accept it. What happens when we come into the acceptance of the will of Yah? We understand that it has to be done just as he wrote it, just as he designed it, just as he declared it. He has declared something. And I know that sounds strange to some people to say, but he declared something and he gave men power to not do what he declared. We're made in his image and after his likeness. This is what makes a man an enemy of Yah, because he opposes everything that is called Yah. He opposes everything concerning Yah, right? This is why we're going to get to this place, or many, I shouldn't say we, because I don't speak French in this category. Many are going to get to the place where the Mashiach himself says, depart from me, I never knew you. I never knew you. Why? Because you didn't allow my kingdom to come. Do you understand that as the vessels of Yah, as the temple of Yah, we are supposed to be carrying an unshakable kingdom according to Hebrews? An unshakable kingdom, a kingdom that cannot be shaken, a kingdom that cannot be overthrown. We're supposed to be carrying that as governmental agents of Yah. And so therefore, if we carry in that kingdom, then wherever we go, the kingdom has come. This is why the master came and he said, listen, the kingdom has come. And everybody's looking around like, what kingdom? What are you talking about? You rode in here on a donkey. We're trying to see where the warriors, where's your army, when is going to be the coming of your kingdom? I don't understand what's going on, because they were looking from a physical perspective. They didn't understand the spiritual ramifications of this kingdom for a future showing when he comes back riding on a horse, right? When he comes back in that kind of glory. But there was a humbling that had to take place. And as I'm looking at this beginning, I'm looking at the word of Yah, and I'm looking at the breath of Yah, and I'm looking at how this breath was given to us and how that breath should put us in a humble place, not in a haughty place. It should put us in a humble place, not in a haughty place. Because when we are in that humble place, we are able to be the facilitator of this kingdom that comes. When we're in the humble place, we still see ourselves as servants, even though we're leaders. I could have went to bed tonight. I was tired. I promise you I was tired. I was so tired. I was struggling. But I made a promise. The Father said, you gotta get back on. I know it's late, but you got to get back on. You got to finish what you started. It's a thing that we got to come into that place of service till it takes us away from the things that we want in the moment that we want it. Service. Your kingdom come. Your will be done. I'm not worried about me right now. You do what you want to do, Father, in me. You do what you want to do through me. That's what's most important. I'm going to read you a couple of things and I'm going to turn y'all loose. We talked about free will. And I saw that as how, credit cards are pre-qualification. They always tell you, you're pre-qualified. But then there's other information that's necessary to determine the final outcome, right? It's some things you're going to have to do. Some things you're going to have to be in alignment with in order for that final outcome to be in your favor. And so this is one of the things that came up when I was resting. So many people are confused by the inconsistent, non-performing information of the religious industrial complex. What the religious industrial complex declares often only works for or applies to them as the recipient. If you give your last in this offering, I declare God is going to bless you. The recipient is only one-sided, because the one declaring it had a motive in the conversation to take and not to give. The principle of sowing and reaping is a truth. Seed time and harvest is an undeniable principle. However, many don't understand the context of every principle of Yah is obedience. The context of every principle of Yah is obedience. We see this in the garden. This was a one-sided thing. I want this to consume it upon my lust. James chapter 4, from whence cometh wars and fightings among you, right? Why are people bent out of shape and all upset, right? It's because they desire something that they can't have. But if they have it, they're asking for it, but they're asking amiss because they just want to simply consume it upon their own lust. And this is separated. This is This is separated from Yah. It's not about consuming upon our own lust. Everything we get is about the covenant. It's so that he can establish his covenant. Every blessing of Yah is about not just enriching us, but enriching the lives of the people around us. The masses are attempting to perform by flesh, but they have not actualized spiritually. We talked about this. A lot of people are asking Yah to do things, and they have not actualized spiritually what they're asking for, because if they understood how to actualize it spiritually, they'd be declaring it and not asking for it. This makes for unbalanced transactions, which indicates an alarm of fraudulent activity. This is what happened in the garden. Fraudulent activity. You're misusing what I've given you. You're not utilizing what I've fashioned you for. And this is the first thing that the Father did when the earth was out of sorts again, right? He recreates because it's not operating like it should operate. It's not activating like it should activate. There are no physical transactions in the absence of spiritual transactions. This is a reality. So when we talk about we're wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, we're dealing with spiritual wickedness in high places. We're dealing with things that are ancient, that have been around for a long time, right? These things are spiritual transactions. There are spiritual transactions that must take place before the physical manifestation of a thing even happens. So this is a part of how we are to pray and to position ourselves. It's the spiritual transaction first, the acknowledgement of who Yah is, where he's seated, his authority, right? And as we are acknowledging that, we are becoming one with that authority and one with that seat. You know, at the end of the day, he said, I've given you a seat in heavenly places, far above principalities and powers, far above spiritual wickedness and all of that stuff. But we can't attain to that. We can't ascend to that without the recognition of where he's seated and what he's allowing. We've got to tap into the spiritual reality in order to see the physical realities. So in today's Torah, or yesterday's Torah, and possibly throughout the book of Genesis, we may discuss two very essential components, and that's going to be imagination and illumination. And that's so important. Because what Adam had in his mind in the moment that he missed that mark, he began to imagine a thing other than what he should have imagined. He should have seen himself back in right standing. He should have seen himself coming clean. He should have seen his father accepting him again. But instead, he hid because he knew that he was wrong, but he didn't do anything to correct it. His imagination was running wild with him. Man, we got to be mindful of our imagination, because the imagination is creating these actionable images. But what is it in alignment with? What is it in alignment with? I know people today that are talking themselves out of the blessing of Yah that maketh rich, because they don't know how to breathe. They don't know what to say. They're not using the breath of Yah properly. So they're not seeing manifestation because they're not using the breath. But you can't utilize his breath without being in the relationship. It's a connection there. The thing that grounds the imagination is its connection. The imagination has been sorely misrepresented in religious industrial complex circles, going from the image, going from the imagination without Yah, or either going all the way to the other side of the spectrum, which is saying imagination is the devil. So we've got this imbalance there, right? Either we're not going to acknowledge Yah in the imagination, or we're going to just say that we shouldn't have no imagination. And both of those routes are wrong. They're both erroneous, right? So we got to deal with these things, because the Father wants to deal with us in the identity, in the authentic identity that he's formed concerning us. He wants to deal with us there, so that when he speaks a word to us, we begin to form the actionable images. Because as I stated before, those actionable images actually even show us the path that we're supposed to walk. It puts in front of us the stones, the path that we're supposed to walk. If you're a adversary of scripture, you often have probably thought about Abraham and how he made the journey from Ur the Chaldees to uh, Kadesh Barnea, or to Canaan, right? How did he get there? He wasn't given a map, a physical map, but there was an internal map. As long as he was in obedience to Yah, he was ordered, his steps were ordered, but he was moving. He wasn't just sitting waiting on Yah to say something to him. He heard what Yah said, and so he began to get up and move. Yah told me something in this last season, and I began to get up and move. I've done it several times where it was a shift coming, there was a change coming, there was a transition happening, and I got up and I packed my stuff, I packed my bags. I got up and I started moving. Why? Because I heard him say, the shift is come. There's no sense in me sitting like, I'm just waiting on the shift to manifest. I just want the shift to manifest. Yeah, nothing's manifested until you start moving in the obedience and the instruction to the obedience that Yah has given. That's when you're going to see something. He's going to deal with this imagination because it's causing a separation. It's causing a separation. I love y'all. Listen, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go get me some rest. I will see y'all next week. Thank you for being on. Thank you for taking the time to come and to listen to the other part of what we have discussed. And we'll go back over a couple of things next week when we shift from chapter 4 on to the next couple of chapters that the Father gives us. I don't know. We might read more chapters next week. I don't know. We might read less. But there is a word, and we will be in Torah for a minute till he shifts us. And we might go back and forth. We might go back and forth. I don't know. I'm flexible. I just want to do the will of Yah. I just want him to be pleased with me. And that should be the desire of every son. I just want Yah to be pleased. I just want him to be glorified in everything that I do. Listen, you're blessed and don't forget it. And remember, the body is a weak thing. See, when you're tired, your tongue get twisted. The body is a weak thing. It's not a meat thing. It's a weak thing. I'll see y'all next week for Torah, for Back to Torah, Back to the